Adam Miller from Revel Bikes. Welcome to Second Nature.
Thanks, Aaron. Good to be here.
I'm not going to bury the lead on this one. You founded a bike company. You had a meteoric rise. You ended up taking on some private equity, exiting, and then when it looked like the doors were going to close on Revel, you bought it back, and you are now a handful of weeks back into running the business again. That's sort of the headline of the story. I'm sure there's a lot more to dig into there. But I think where we need to start before we get to that point is actually the beginning of Revel Bikes. I want to work into this to better understand everything there is to know because surely there are some moments that created that, and we all know what has happened in the bike industry over the last couple of years, and it's specifically like all of the outdoor industry. But I want to put that out there for anybody listening who maybe isn't in the bike industry and just wants to be along for the ride on this one because I think this is going to be so fascinating to understand the way this kind of unfolded and how it continues to unfold because I don't think it's specific to the bike industry at all. I think this is something that's happening everywhere, and probably bits of it are, really helpful insights, maybe some bits cautionary tale. But either way, there's a lot to unpack here, and that's what we're going to do over the next hour or so, if that's cool with you.
That sounds great. I'm excited to talk about it. Yeah, I'm here. It's at the time that we're recording this, I'm at 5 weeks into operating my new business again. I started the company uh, nine-ish years ago now, and then just was able to buy it back after the private equity company closed it, and I feel fortunate to be in this situation. But it's been just a crazy few weeks or couple months really through this process. So now we're up and running again and selling great bikes, and it's really good to be here. But yeah, happy to chat about how we got to this point, and definitely learned a few lessons along the way. That's for sure.
I was doing some research and I read somewhere that you launched Revel Bikes with $96 of Facebook ads. Is that right? Can you give us kind of the founding story of what
Yeah.
was the insight to launch a bike brand? What was, kind of your founding principles and how did it all come together?
Yeah, yeah. It was definitely like looking at the time through a lot of my business kind of journey. I thought I was all totally normal and just, having fun, working hard. As I've looked back on it a lot and reflected, there are a lot of those very stereotypical kind of like bootstrap startup stories of, 2 in the morning in the living room with all my first several employees all lived at my same house and, putting bikes together on the floor and talking to China and last minute, plane trips over to visit the manufacturers. There's a lot of that kind of real scrappy startup company, and it's fun to think back on that. So it's kind of fun to share that now if people find it interesting. And yeah, like I started all this because I was a full-on bike nerd. Like when I was 11 years old, I started a mini bike eBay business where I buy bikes on eBay and take them all apart and then sell the parts on eBay. And my mom would like drive me to the post office to sell like derailleurs and brakes and stuff that I took off bikes and made a few bucks here and there. And started working in a bike shop. I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. Started working in the bike shop there. So I've just kind of like like I've tried a lot of sports. Biking was the one that just kind of clicked best with me. I still like doing lots of other sports, but biking's definitely my main one. And so I've been kind of a full techie bike product guy my whole life. But over the last several years, I've realized that I actually really enjoy the business side of it, probably about as much as how much I enjoy the bike side of it. So one of my goals with coming back to Revel and this new business is to really just be a lot more transparent about all the business side of things. I think from if I really zoom out, the bike industry has gone through a lot of ups and downs over the last few years, probably more downs than ups in the overall industry the last couple of years. And I think if collectively we can all use this as a way to kind of learn from what went well and what didn't go well, and we can sort of level up as a bike industry in general, it'll help the whole sport. I think historically, and I've especially been very into like, hey, bikes and business don't mix. Like, I ride bikes to escape, kind of the stresses of the workday, and a lot of our customers buy a bike to, as their main hobby to, wind down after a day at work. So I try to really separate the two. Bikes are fun, business is business. But that's one major change I want to make now is actually, at least for me personally, bikes and business are completely intertwined. And it's something I actually really, I feel lucky that I can make my passion my business it definitely makes for some, blurred lines of work-life balance at times. But, at the end of the day, like I get to make bikes and sell bikes. And so why not talk about the business side of it all too? So
Absolutely. I mean, there's no difference in work-life balance if you live in a house with all the other people that are working at your company. Tell me about that. I mean, that's very common, I think, in the tech startup world, but in bikes to have all your employees under one roof essentially as you're, putting bikes together and getting stuff going. I haven't heard of that one before. How did that all come together? And I guess also importantly, what was that founding insight where you're like, we need to have I need to launch a bike brand. I need to make this thing happen. What got you sort of off the couch to even do something like that? Because sure, you had this history selling bike parts and stuff through eBay and whatnot, but to actually launch a bike brand that, the bikes have to be designed, there's so much that goes into that. It's not something you can just do.
yeah, yeah, I think um, so. I'll just kind of go through my quick history and get up through that starting point of the company. I was working in the bike shop in Alaska. I ended up going to school in Colorado. I wanted to go be able to ride mountain bikes in the popular mountain bike place, and worked in a bike shop there through college a little bit, and then I decided to start my first bike business while I was an undergrad at Colorado College. I made carbon fat bikes. It's a very very niche product, but from growing up in Alaska, I got into fat bikes. I was into biking, and if you like riding bikes in Alaska, you're riding fat bikes more than half the year to ride on snow. So I got kind of lucky with the timing there. Um, Sort of during that initial fat bike boom, and was able to come out with a company called Borealis, where we had the first carbon fat bike, so kind of lightweight, high performance fat bike. I ended up learning a lot through that company, through trying to finish college, through running that business. It was supposed to be a hobby. We launched the business, and like in an hour I sold the number of bikes I thought we were going to sell in the first year of the company. Like it was just this like nutty thing. I was like in my college house. We had like a party the night before. There might have been a few beer cans everywhere, and I sent out this press release that they got picked up by Bike Rumor. This is back in 2012, I believe, and I put my personal cell phone number in there as the business number, kind of saying like, "Oh, here's this new bike brand that I started, not knowing much about business at all at the time." But I'd gone to, worked on the designs for a couple of years, had visited the factories in China, and made a really innovative, lightweight, modern fat bike at the time, which didn't exist out there. So this one press release went out. I didn't even know when it was going to go out. I didn't have a business phone number. I didn't have a business location. I thought I would sell 50 bikes in the first year, and all of a sudden, I'm like waking up on a Friday morning in a messy college house, and my phone was just ringing and ringing and ringing, and I was like, "What's this about?" And people were buying bikes, and I ended up getting a call from, at the time, the largest online retailer of outdoor products, and they wanted to buy 250 bikes, and I said, "Oh, excuse me, let me get back to my desk really quick," and I put it on mute, and I like jumped up and down, and it's like I didn't even have a desk to go back to. Like it was just like full of craziness. So I got like thrown into the bike industry at that point. Had a business partner, built this company, was able to travel, to Asia to make the bikes, to Europe to sell the bikes, and the company took off. I sold that business to my business partner, kind of as I was leaving college, ready for the next thing. Wonderful experience. Learned so much through that process, and had a real business. I got some real business experience, which I didn't expect. Then I went back to Alaska, took some time off, rode my bikes, decided to start my next bike company, which I wanted to make full suspension carbon bikes. After selling carbon fat bikes, I was like, this is a very niche product. I love them, but like, what are the bikes I want to ride? Full suspension mountain bikes. I also was like, just being a full bike nerd, have a special place in my heart for titanium bikes. And so I decided to start Y Cycles, titanium bike brand. We had three models: gravel bike, plus bike, and then like a funky dirt jumper thing that we just made for fun. And then at the same time, we were developing the Revel Bikes carbon bikes. I knew that would take a long period of time. I didn't want to bring on a ton of investor money. I really like titanium bikes. So it's kind of a win-win-win of like, hey, I can sell these titanium bikes. Every dollar from that we can use to invest in the development of the carbon bikes. And through that, I moved down to Ogden, Utah, where I started the business, had a few connections down there. There's a lot of bike industry there. Um, started that brand. We were selling the Y Cycles product. I kept it nice and small because I wanted to just have a good, manageable, fun business. I was working with a few guys, Chris Canfield for the suspension platform, Mike Giese for the design, which now I'm very pleased to say Mike Giese is now our new director of product here at the new Revel as of a month ago. So kind of came full circle. But this is all in around 2015, 16, 17, we were kicking off those brands and those bikes. And I guess you asked like what made me decide that I wanted to, needed the world needed another bike brand. And I think, I'm kind of really picky and particular about products and especially now, I mean, there's a lot of amazing bikes out there. But back then I wanted a few things differently. I'd kind of grown up doing all kinds of different bike racing, from road, cyclocross, cross country. Um, but I was finding myself having a lot more fun with like actual just mountain biking, going up and down, riding chairlifts, doing the downhill park thing. And so I kind of got away from that racing mentality and more into the biking for fun mentality. But at the same time, it was pretty competitive. I like riding uphill. I like going on endurance rides, even if some of that stuff isn't isn't too popular. Um, and wanted a bike that pedaled really well, but also could kind of handle those downhills. And just being a particular, bike geek, I was like, hey, I think we could do something a little bit different. And where it really kicked off was I knew I wanted to start this full suspension bike brand, but didn't know when. And I didn't want to just make another bike similar to other ones out there. There's a lot of bikes with a DW suspension system, or a couple brands with VPP, or a few brands with Horselink systems, and wanted to do something differentiated there. So I rode a Canfield bike, which at the time I kind of thought, that brand is very like big heavy metal bikes for Red Bull Rampage. I didn't really have it in my mind as like that wasn't the direction I wanted to go. I wanted to go kind of more high-end niche, mainstream, if you can call it that, within the mountain bike world there. And really just bikes that I wanted and that, my friends and I that were working on the business wanted. So I rode that Canfield bike to try out their patented suspension system. And like in the parking lot, I was like, holy hell, this is the best. Like it pedals so well. And at that point hadn't really been used on bikes for more of that like wider range of um, mountain biking. So I asked Chris Canfield, I just met him we're at like dirt demos and Interbike. I was like, hey man, this is awesome. Like, can I license your suspension system and make some bikes with it? And he goes, yeah, hell yeah, that's awesome. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, how do the business terms work? Because I had talked with the other suspension companies, and there's a very specific process of like, here's what you pay, here's per bike, here's all this, legal stuff. And um, I was like, so Chris, how does this work to license CBF? And he's like, I don't know, man. You tell me. Let's figure something out. And it was just like perfect. Like right off the bat, we got along great, and we had spent like hours on at the time Skype calls, like moving pivot points around and designing the CBF suspension platform for the Revel bikes that we were making. And so that was really what kicked it off. It's like, hey, we have access to this unique suspension patent. It hasn't been used on carbon bikes before, and it hasn't been used on bikes that are really, made to, fit right in there with a lot of the main brands out there. Think of Santa Cruz, Yeti, Pivot, Ibis, all those sorts of brands. At the time, I thought, hey, maybe in 10 or 20 years, I hope that, we can have a company that's kind of on par with some of those brands that I think are really cool. And I think we have this way to do it using the suspension system. And then if we can dial in the geometries, work with the best materials, I think we can get there. And we ended up launching the brand in 2019 at Sedona Bike Fest. We did spend a grand total of $96 on Facebook advertising in those first few months total to launch the brand. We went to the Sedona Bike Fest, which was an awesome place. Our bikes performed really well on those Sedona chunky trails. Um, but we went there. The other advertising we did was we had one bike that we went out to Pink Bike, and then one bike that actually I had to be in Germany, and I flew over with a bike, so it's cheaper than shipping it to Enduro Mountain Bike magazine in Germany. Um, at the time, I'd taken out like 7 different travel credit cards to get like the airline miles, points that they'd have, and then I used that for all my trips to go to Asia for the manufacturing, or for like this trip to Europe to meet with like a magazine and a few distributors, and then I actually tagged on a little like college friends, a few days of a Euro trip there because I had to have some fun too. Um, but we launched the brand at Sedona Fest the morning of Sedona Bike Fest. We had a tiny Airbnb. A few of us were sleeping in our vans. Um, and I didn't know what to expect. We had a chunk of bikes in stock that I thought would last for the summer. Um, and that morning, the two product reviews went live from Pink Bike and Enduromag in Germany. And I really wanted like a German or a European magazine too, just to show like, hey, we're not just like this, like we are this really small, tiny company in Colorado, but like we have ambitions to be to be a little bigger. So I was really happy they were willing to check out the bike. And these two reviews went live, and like I was so nervous. I was just like, if I like the bikes, we'd spent years working on them, but maybe I'm biased. If other people like, if these reviews are good, great, we're golden. If they're bad, like this business is dead. It was kind of like a make it or break it there. And we had like 8 demo bikes at the event that people were going to ride, but nobody had ever heard of us. Like we kept things super under wraps. Like, what's this new bike company coming out? And I remember just seeing the reviews go live, and I like sat under this juniper tree in Sedona, and I was like reading them on my phone, just kind of like I was just so nervous. It was, my years and years of work. I had taken out two second mortgages, home equity lines of credit on my house. I'd sold my first bike company, and I put all those dollars into this, and then the rest of those dollars into a house because then I could borrow, like 80%, of your equity value in the home. I could borrow that money to buy bike parts to then sell and hopefully make a little bit more money. Um, I had two friends invested in the business at the time, and so I had kind of a lot of pressure on myself of like, hey, this thing better work. I had my backup plan that I did. I had an old like ambulance camper van that I bought and like turned it into a camper van. It had like ambulance lights on it, and my backup plan was like, if this doesn't work out, I'm like, at least I can live in my van and maybe I'll try to go to law school or something like that. But like uh, it was definitely like looking back, I was a little too scrappy. Like I should have taken on a little bit more investment money. Easy to say now because the business went well, all things considered. But um, I was really trying to be like, hey, let's put every dollar we can into making the best product we can and to having the best people. We had a small group of people. The first 6 employees did all live with me. Two of them lived in their van out, in my driveway, and then would like bum showers and stuff like that. And that was really great for like a year and a half. And then all of us were like, hey, we really like each other. We're not living together and working together. So that was short lived.
I mean, you were all in, maxing out the, home equity and credit cards and putting all the money that you'd made from previous acquisitions and stuff all into this one thing. Did you feel like did you feel confident? I mean, based on the launch of your original bike company and how it kind of went gangbusters right out of the gate, did that give you some level of confidence of like, oh, I can do this. I've done it before. Or did you really feel like you were starting from square one and this like all in mentality was a pretty big move? I don't know.
Yeah, it was more on the latter of that. It felt like a pretty big move because yeah, I'd done well on fat bikes. I launched a product where there was zero competition. In the few months following our launch, there was some competition, but making bikes that were jumping in to compete with, billion-dollar companies, multi-hundred-million-dollar companies with 25, 30, 40 years of history under the brand and trying to launch a full suspension bike, like that's the epitome of like engineering and product development and brand. And I mean I do it myself. Like once I buy a product from a certain brand, I have a lot of affinity for that brand. So for me to go switch to buy something from a different brand, it better take something special. So I think I was also a little bit of a maybe preparing for the worst mentality. That's sort of how I've had a lot of my business, I don't know, career. It's maybe not the healthiest, but I think, having the thought of like trying to figure out everything that could go wrong and trying to solve for that. So yeah, I was really nervous. I mean, financially, I was I was all in plus some. Like I didn't even like my parents have been amazing and so supportive my whole life, but I like didn't even tell them, you know, at all like how much money I was in debt for with the bank of like they would have lost it. Um, uh, so no, I was really nervous, and our whole team was, but we were excited because we'd spent years creating these bikes. We knew they were great, but like, who knows? And so I sat there reading those first two reviews, and it was just like this feeling of relief. It was like, the first few sentences of both the reviews were just like, the bike's freaking amazing. How did this company just come out of nowhere? And then like, we kind of have a rule where we say like don't read the comments like on any article because usually the comment sections are pretty bad.
Mhm.
But we were reading the comments on Pink Bike and like everything was good. Everyone's like, this is so cool, this is new. Like people would just look were like kind of were receptive to the new company, new mentality, a new design. And not any one thing we were doing was like wildly groundbreaking. It was kind of this like across the board. I think we checked a lot of boxes, which looking back, I'm just like, man, I really felt like we were winging it a lot of the time, but like it did work out really well. And we had all taken bets. Like there were six of us in the company when we started there. We all took bets the night before, like when we'd sell our first bike, and we were all off by like days. Like we launched that morning. We had a line of people to ride the bikes because they had seen the Pink Bike article. And like at 9 a.m., people started demoing bikes, and at 9:15, we sold our first bike. And it's to this guy that I still talk with, every once in a while. He comes out here to ride. He's bought several bikes since then, but like just Jason, he's the man. But it was just like such this crazy like feeling of launching the brand and just having it take off. And then we were like, oh, we got to kick it into high gear. Like we're sold out in 3 days. We sold out of the bikes that would last us for the summer. So I guess I made that mistake twice. Um, and so then it was like working with the factories, getting things built up, getting a new space. I moved the business a few times here in Carbondale. I guess I might have skipped that. I moved the company to a small town in the mountains of Colorado because I just wanted that lifestyle of like great bike trails and skiing up the road and passionate people that like making bikes for what we like to do for fun. So we got back. We moved our office to a bigger facility in Carbondale. And yeah, and then it just kind of really took off from there.
Were there any other big moments for you? So getting the reviews to drop on the same day as your bike launch, I've got to imagine that was embargoed at some level of like, hey, we're launching the company at this time, this whatever. And those media outlets were sort of planning on that. But were there other levers that happened sort of pre-pandemic, which actually put it in context, there was not a very big window from when you launched until the pandemic hit. But can you think of anything else that happened pre-pandemic that would have made like a big impact in terms of establishing the brand?
Not particularly. I mean, we were. It was very grassroots. Chris Reichel is my main guy that did marketing, so he and I had worked together for years. We worked together trying to kind of get the word out there, but it was very grassroots. Like we just texted. He had a lot of contacts. I had a few contacts. We like texted a few people we knew at these magazines and said, "Hey, do you want to review this bike? And can you wait till this embargo date to share it?" So there's nothing fancy like. But it was all authentic. Like looking back on it, like I didn't even know what that word authenticity really meant. I was like, yeah, of course, we're making bikes we want, and we're gonna tell our friends about them, and that's about it. So very straightforward in that sense. But no, so I mean, that we launched just about a year and a few days before the pandemic, hit. Uh, and things took off like crazy that year. And 2019 wasn't necessarily a great year in the outdoor industry or the bike industry, but we grew a ton, and it was faster than I ever thought, and it ended up being really great timing. I feel very fortunate that we launched. If we had launched at COVID time, it would have been really tough with supply chain stuff. But because we were ramping up, our factories were really good. We were able to work with our factories to get some more capacity to build more bikes. We were designing more bikes at the time too, and COVID happened. Things were so great. COVID happened, and boom, like terrible for a month. And it was just an awful time for everybody in the world, of course. Uh, Terrifying time from a health standpoint, especially back then when we didn't know what was going on. But then from a business standpoint, I was on the phone with everybody I knew in the bike industry. Like we were just talking constantly. People were like, "What do we do?" I mean, if we've all kind of skipped over it, but like that month or two, there were mass layoffs from all the big companies. On Monday, I had a few $100,000 backlog of orders that's kind of how we managed the business. Like, okay, we're waiting to ship these bikes out, which will take a few weeks. On Monday, I had that few $100,000 of orders. On Tuesday, it was cut in about half. On Wednesday, it was zero. And I was like, we don't have enough money in the bank. There was no concept of like keeping it. a bunch of cash in your bank and the doomsday fund. Like during COVID, everyone, in my business circles, we started talking about like, oh, how much cash should you have in the bank in case things happen? It's like, well, wish I talked about that before. Um, but very fortunately, the bike world came back so quickly from that. People started riding bikes and going outside, and I can't imagine what other businesses went through because it was really bad for us for a short amount of time. But then things just took off, and then it was how fast can we hire people, how fast can we make bikes, and we ended up during that time too. We got a lot of good product reviews. Product reviews was really how we did our marketing. We'd show up to events to get people on demo bikes because if people rode them, they liked them and they bought them, and magazine reviews. All like relatively low cost ways to get the word out there, but it worked. Um, we ended up getting like best overall bike of the year from Outside Magazine. We won a few other like best short travel bike or best fat bike actually on the titanium one. But we won best overall bike for our Rascal in 2021 or 2020, I forget. And that was one of those ones that just really moved the needle. Like the day after that went live, a lot of people bought our bikes, and that kind of leveled us up again. And then through that whole time, like we were growing, business was good, we were really healthy, but we were growing so fast that I was always looking for capital. I had at the time, I five investors, myself, and then four other investors. I owned a majority of the business because I wanted to keep that and keep it really simple. But the bike industry, the bike brand business is rather inefficient from a cash standpoint. You have to pay for your development, your molds, your tooling, pay for your bikes. Then you get the bikes a few months later, then you sell them to retailers, and then you get paid a few months later. So everything, I felt like I was in the cash flow business just as much as I was in the bike business. So on paper, we were, profitable. We're a very healthy business. But as we were growing so quickly, you always have to use that money and then buy more stuff because you're like, hey, next month we're going to sell more bikes, and the next month we're going to sell more bikes. And I had enough experience to know like, hey, it's not good to grow too fast. Like we should pump the brakes and make sure we do things right. Looking back, I wish I pumped the brakes a little bit more, but it's tough when people are trying to, hand you money essentially, and and you're saying no.
Yeah.
I wasn't raised like that. Like um,
I'd be curious actually on the sales side of things. How did you manage the D2C versus independent bike shops, the retailers? Because when it comes to that sales cycle, obviously direct to consumer would be a way to shorten the cycle a little bit, where you can kind of get paid up front, whereas a retailer, you ship them bikes and then they eventually pay you on net terms. So how did you think about that, just as an aside on this whole financial thing?
Totally, and you're spot on, which is a big reason now we're D2C for well, for a lot of other reasons too. But a D2C model does have a lot of benefits in that way to get a customer a great price product to help the brand be a little bit more successful, which helps the customer get a great price product. So like it definitely makes sense now. At the time when we launched, 2019 wasn't that long ago, but it was kind of a long time ago in the D2C high-end product world. There's just a lot's changed in the last 5, 6 years. I actually thought we'd be all D2C. We priced our bikes to be much, really a D2C brand when we launched. And we certainly sold some bikes D2C, but it was sort of funny. In the beginning, we had so much interest from bike shops. So, of course, we said, yeah, of course, we'll sell you bikes. So we did a lot. It was like this weird, like, kind of like sine wave where we had way more interest from bike shops because my theory is new brand, no matter what carbon bike you're looking at, it's an expensive high-end bike, even if ours were 100 or 200 or $300 less expensive than a Santa Cruz or Pivot or whatever. Like they're all expensive purchases. So I I kind of realized a lot of people still wanted to go into a bike shop in person, see that bike, test drive that bike before forking over a big chunk of money, which is totally understandable. So then we actually switched a little bit more to bike shops, but still always doing D2C sales. And then as things changed, fast forwarding a little bit, inventory issues over the last few years, bike shops having too much inventory, bigger brands having too much inventory, bigger brands pushing bike shops to take inventory from them, not from smaller brands like us. The bike shop model became very, very challenging, which is a reason that here 5 weeks ago, with the relaunch of Revel, we are D2C focused brand now. And we do have a frame only program for bike shops. I worked with bike shops for years, absolutely love shops. And I think if a customer wants to go into a shop and build up a custom bike, they absolutely should. It's a great, fun way to do things. So we want to try to support that as well.
Right on. Yeah, I think that's important too. As retailers are sort of trying to find their feet, and also as brands are trying to make ends meet effectively. It's an interesting discussion to have, and I think it's something that is a constantly evolving thing as well. It made sense, especially during the pandemic, the DTC thing. You couldn't go into shops, or you couldn't access a lot of this stuff. But also for a brand like you said that's starting out, to have an army of bike shop employees who are able to speak to the brand, the bike, to show it off. There's yeah, it's a difficult balance between all that stuff.
It totally is, and I think all things considered, when we just recently when we announced that we were going to be, a D2C focused brand, I was expecting a lot of backlash from shops. Like, there's a lot of strong feelings when it comes to that stuff. But I've been pretty amazed at how positive every shop was. Even like, the shop I worked at for years in high school in Alaska, that was a dealer of ours. Like, the owner texted me and he was just like, that seems like a really good call. Good job. Good decision there. And we got a lot of that from shops. They're like, oh, this kind of stings a little bit because we like your bikes. We want to sell them, but that's the right decision. Like, I think collectively people have started talking a lot more about the business side in the bike world. And if businesses are more successful, they invest more money in R&D, they make better bikes, and better bikes can mean a more fun bike to ride, or it can mean the same quality bike at a better price that people get to ride. And having a healthy, sustainable business is just so much better for everybody. It creates marketing budgets that can be used to sponsor other riders. It creates a marketing budget that can be a donation to new trails being made. It can be public advocacy for more trails or for proper e-bike regulations. Like, a healthy business helps everybody. And I think we're starting to see people really realize that, as we've seen a lot of companies go out of business. A lot of bike shops have gone out of business in the last year or two with all these challenges. So I think everybody kind of realized, like, hey, a change needed to happen if this bike industry is going to be successful for the long haul for all of us. We need some changes on how bikes are bought and sold,
Mhm.
and that's okay. Let's embrace it.
Yeah, yeah, we're in an era of difficult but hopefully long-term decisions being made, right? Okay, so we're on the timeline here. It's the pandemic is happening, but it seems like you've kind of weathered a lot of the storm. You've got the brand up and running. You've got orders coming in. You've got positive reviews coming through. What's sort of next in this cycle? Because I've got to imagine with lots of orders is a big capital requirement to, like you said, in this cycle, you got to have a lot of money to order the bikes so that they can be made, assembled, and shipped to you so that then you can fulfill those orders. So I've got to imagine probably next stop on this timeline is a need for more capital.
Yes, yes, you nailed it. That's like the business side of the bike world, which is fun to talk about now. We're always looking for capital. Like, during that time, like, I kind of I forced myself to get into real estate because it's the easiest way to borrow capital as a smaller business. Like, banks will loan you money on a house more than they'll loan you money on bicycle business inventory by a long shot. So I would like remodel a room in my house, have it appraised, then go increase my line of credit from the bank. And I'd done that a few different times. I've
Wait. So you remodeled your house to raise the property value so that you could then borrow even more money on your home equity line.
Yeah,
Okay, all right. Just making sure I'm on.
it sounds a little ridiculous as I say it out loud, but it just was like, hey, if the house is worth 20 grand more and then I can borrow 17 grand more from the bank on that, and I can, that gets me, I'm making up numbers, 30 more bikes, 10, whatever it is, like that's another incremental thing. So that's sort of how bootstrapped we were. I mean, it was very tactful, but it was, a different way of doing business is I could have gone to a venture capital firm early on and said, hey, I need $5 million so I can build this business, got all that money, boom, go. But that comes with its own host of things. So and I kind of did something in between a little later on. So uh, we we were always looking for capital, and we were smart enough to say no to a lot of orders. I mean, we stopped accepting new dealers every single day. We'd have bike shops call and say, "Hey, I want to buy your bikes. I'll buy 5 of them. I'll buy 10 of them." And we said no. I was hiring people as fast as I could. So many of us were, we started as six friends in a warehouse. And then I brought on more people kind of as quickly as I could. And pretty quickly, I kind of felt like I got in over my head, I guess, just to be totally honest. Like we're growing 600% a year. We're growing every month, we're growing. And we were saying no. At a certain point, there was one very specific moment, and I've just started telling this story a little bit, but this was about early 2021. One of the biggest online retailer at the time, really wanted to sell our bikes, really wanted to sell our bikes. And for months I said like, no, sorry, we can't take you on as a customer. Like we don't have enough bikes. We don't have the capacity to do this. And at one point they they'd just been hammering me like, hey, we want to buy a lot of bikes from you. Um, and I just said, no, 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 no. Finally, they sent me an email with a purchase order. They had made up their own part numbers. Like usually how it works is a brand makes a SKU list, and these are registered numbers. And a big company like that needs that list with all the prices before they can make a purchase order to give to the company to buy the bikes. And they gave me this purchase order with made up SKUs, and it was for more money than I thought. Like it was like a $940,000 purchase order for bikes. And if 5 years ago someone told me one person, if someone told me 100 bike shops, let alone one bike shop, would give me a purchase order for that much money, I'd say you're freaking crazy. Like I got 7 credit cards taken out for this business. Like I know it's going to grow, but I don't think I'm going to see numbers like that. And I remember getting this purchase order for nearly $1 million, and I just laughed. I was like, "There's no way! Like we're not selling them these bikes. Like this can't happen." And that on top of telling bike shops every day we can't sell them bikes, on top of me trying to borrow and raise money all the time, I brought on other investors to have enough cash to keep this growth rate going, even though we were slowing the growth, on top of trying to hire people and not really knowing if I was doing that the right way. Who do we need? What do we need? How do I manage this? How do I? That's such irresponsible business to say no to an order that size. These
Right.
are the things that was like they were going through my mind, and I was like, I should sell the business. I should, at this point, I should sell the business. I want to stay on. I don't want to sell it and walk away. So I didn't make any big plan to like make this a big public thing. But me and my 5 investors aren't going to have the capital needed to keep this thing going, and I don't think I have the expertise to keep this thing going. Looking back on it, I think through learning a lot, you know, it was all just a great learning experience. I'll chalk it up to that. But I, so I hired an investment banker. I went through the sales process, and it was really cool because we were performing so well as a company. And I always had this mentality of like, hey, the best time to ask for investment money is when you don't need it. Because when you
Mm.
need it and you're like, hey, I'm not sure I can make payroll next week, that's when investors have the upper hand and they can drive more of the terms. If you say like, hey, we're growing and I could use the money and it'll help us grow, that's the best time to bring on investment money.
I mean, a $1 million purchase order in hand is probably a pretty useful tactic for creating leverage during a discussion like that.
Totally. And that was never even, it was so just honest. I was just like, literally, like, what do I do? Like, what, what do I do about this? Um, and I realized this, I'm really getting into the business side of all this and the numbers. I could geek out on bikes all day long, but just for the
No,
business.
this is what we're here for, man. This is the business of the outdoor industry. We want to know the nuts and bolts of it. And I think like what I'd be curious, it's obvious that you need capital to be able to fulfill orders to be able to grow, and the demand is high enough that it feels relevant to be bringing that in. But were you also looking for expertise in these like bigger business people that maybe existed outside the bike industry? Was that sort of on your radar of like, I need help in ways beyond capital at this stage?
Absolutely. We're hiring a management team. I need to hire a COO. We didn't have job titles before. It was just like, hey, this guy does sales. This guy does production. I don't know what I am. I'm the owner. I'm the janitor sometimes. I sleep in my van at demo events. Like we were kind of this small company vibe. But looking back on it, we were actually way more dialed than I gave us some credit for, I think, which was a good learning takeaway there. But I really did want the expertise. How do I grow this? If I'm going to have 50 employees, 100 employees, I wanted to have a facility in Asia so that we could support our international sales. I was just kind of like had these ambitions, but I was kind of overwhelmed with how to do it. So interviewed all these private equity firms, individual buyers, and it was really fun, actually. It was a fun process. A lot of people told me, like, hey, when you go through due diligence, when you're selling a business, like it's the hardest thing a company founder will ever do. It's just, these private equity firms will beat you up and it's so difficult. And we got several offers. Actually, I didn't even choose the highest one. I chose one that I thought would be a really great firm to help us with all these things and not have a really specific like hold period for the investment, like a certain required time. They were very flexible and could keep it for a long time. And I was still going to have an ownership percentage with whatever deal we did, but just kind of have a stronger private equity firm to back the business and to help us grow. And we went through that diligence. We got all these, letters of intents and these offers on the business, and we went through that diligence process. And I was so prepared for it to be just like awful because everybody I talked to and everything I read said it would be. And I was really proud of our company and our team, like for being like, bike nerds externally. Well, we are true bike nerds, but really showing off that bike nerd side. Like we'd focused on having a really well run business and a really well organized operation. And diligence was like easy. Like everybody involved was like, "Oh, you guys are super dialed. Like companies your size are never this organized." And I was like, "Yeah, you guys rule. I'm really lucky to work with all these people because I'm not a very organized person, but luckily other people here were." Um, so we closed the deal. We kept it quiet. I was able to give every employee a surprise bonus, like a really meaningful bonus. Like there was a lot of happy tears in my office that day. I was able to give, my other four investors, they all got returns that were like very, very outsized, like several, is some life-changing money all around. And it was really rewarding for me to see the positive impact that finances can have on a situation. Um, so a lot of good stuff there. And then it was funny, we like didn't even celebrate. We just kept on going. And we were like, all of a sudden, now I didn't have to worry about capital. The private equity firm could go to JP Morgan and get a big fat line of credit that we could use to fund our development. They said to me, and this was one of the great things they brought to the table before some things went not as great, is they said to me, "Hey, what do you want to do from a product development standpoint? Like, what do you see?" And I kind of laid it out there. I want our own wholly owned facility in Taichung, right in the heart of the bike industry. I want to make bikes in this factory over here in Vietnam, and I want to be able to have this in, I don't know, whatever I said is like, here's what I want. And they said, great, we'll pay for it. And so we got to kick into high gear of building our own facility in Taichung and getting our bikes into the best factory in the world, kicking off a few more development projects that we would have been able to do otherwise. And what's neat is when I just bought this company back, they had just launched three bikes, and those were all three bikes that I started working on in 2022, 23, after the private equity firm came in, and we were able to develop in really great ways because we had like at the time kind of unlimited funding from them. Lesson learned through a lot of that as things kind of started going a little bit south is sometimes spending too much money on things and trying to grow too quickly is not healthy for the business. And so it didn't take me too long to kind of say I don't quite jive with how these guys are running the company and where they want to take it. And I made my decision to sell it. I have to kind of accept some of those things, but I fought for it for quite a while. And then at one point I sent a letter out I had a board of directors. All of a sudden I was like running board meetings. We were having like 4 days a week. We'd have like different meetings with the private equity firm. I had to learn how to use PowerPoint again. I hadn't used PowerPoint since high school. Like I was like giving these finance presentations. I actually had to buy suits to go to a few finance conferences, which part of me really enjoyed experiencing a finance conference on Wall Street. Another part of me was like, wow, I'm really happy to be in the bike world and get to wear flip flops to work.
Right.
But it was this whirlwind where I just got into this different world and learned a lot, but then eventually kind of realized just because some people made successful businesses one way doesn't mean that way is going to work for the bike industry, and definitely doesn't mean it's going to work for a smaller, I hate to use the word boutique, kind of high-end mountain bike brand where it's really passion driven and scrappy and creative. Um, so I ended up, I gave the board a letter. I gave them 18 months notice. I said, hey, I love this business, love the people here, love the products, but I'm going to let you know I'm going to work my way out of this because I don't see this as being a kind of successful working relationship. And they came out and tried to make it right. We tried to work together. And eventually I just said, hey guys, this is I'm not feeling it. I don't really agree with a lot of these things, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I wanted the company to be successful. And that was tough. So then, we hired a CEO in 2023. We hired him as COO in 2023. We made him CEO, and that was always fun. I got to hire a replacement for myself. Like I could probably do, I could probably talk a lot about all that, um, but it actually worked really well. Like I was excited. I was like, hey, this is a company I started. I want to see it like grow on its own. Like I have been kind of it's been busier, bigger than I expected. Let's see this thing take off. And so then stayed on for a few months after that, and then fully stepped away in spring of 2024. So just over a year ago, year and a few months ago. And it was like the hardest decision I ever made, like leaving the company that I loved. This company had like brought me so many amazing things, like got to work with so many awesome people who like we all dedicated so much to the business. This company was like we got all these awards for bikes that like I was just always amazed. It's like a few of us in this building have designed and developed these bikes that are like in shootouts with different magazines and like winning awards over companies with like R&D budgets that are 100 or 1,000 times the size of ours. Like this is awesome. This is like it feels so good to just be a part of this. I was able to travel, we talked a little bit about traveling in Asia before this. Like I was able to travel to all these places to make the bikes, to meet these people over there, to make the best bikes, like just such a good thing. So leaving the company was really, really, really hard. And then I was supposed to stay on as a consultant and, kind of continuing onwards. And then, I guess just really long story short, things got a little nasty with the private equity firm kind of after I left and the dust settled. And it was a little bit of a tough year with kind of some of the, I guess, sort of stereotypical games they were playing to sort of get out of some things with me. So, um, learned a lot. Talked to lawyers a little too much during that year, but I had a year off of like traveling a lot and riding my bike more than I have in a decade, and um, working with a lot of kind of other business founders and thinking about what I was going to do next. And I kind of kept on coming back to bikes, even though I thought, oh, maybe I'll do something different. I've done a lot of bike stuff, but um, I kept coming back to bikes after really taking that year and a half off of because like at the end of the day, one, I kind of know the industry well, but to be able to combine a passion and a business, I just kept coming back to like that's really special. Like is after leaving the bike industry, I got to really appreciate how awesome it was. Our business meetings are usually bike rides on trails in some of the best places in the world. Like, it's just there's so many good things. I ended up buying like 20 different domain names for my next bike company, even though I didn't really know what it was gonna be. But I was like, every time I thought of a name, I like bought it. Uh, None of the names were as good as Revel, so I was kind of always like a sticking point in my mind. I was like, damn. Um,
Did did you feel a sense of relief on the way out? Like you got this thing up and running. Like you said, you guys won all kinds of awards. You had companies banging down your door to buy $1 million worth of bikes. You found someone to sort of run the show. You found investment to basically, switch on all the red lights turn green, of like, hey, we can't fulfill that order. Now we have our own production facility. We're able to fulfill all these orders. We're able to do all the things that we couldn't previously do. And now I'm basically exiting my second, bike business that I've launched in a successful way, in a time where things were starting to get a little tumultuous for the industry. Like you sort of got out of it right as things were getting rough. Did you feel like a sense of relief at that stage?
I did, yeah. And, like we sold the company at the end of 2021, which looking back, that was kind of a peak of the bike world. And so, things did get a little more challenging after that with the inventory issues through really end of 2022, 23. Um, Everybody in the bike industry was having a hard time, and so much of that has been talked about a lot, but everybody kept on planning for these 300-400% growth years. All of a sudden that stopped as kind of COVID went away and people's habits changed, and there was less free government money to buy bikes with, and all those things happened where there was then too many bikes. Demand was slowed down a bit, but it was kind of still above 2019 levels, depending on what metrics you look at. Demand's great, more trails, more people riding bikes, but like 3 times more bikes in inventory in bike shops or in brands warehouses. And so things did get really tough. So I do feel kind of bad for a lot of people involved in just the whole bike industry in my company. But I think through that, companies, hindsight's 2020, but companies can and should adapt to ups and downs. And the private equity firm really wanted to keep investing money to keep growing. And I, you know, things were changing where I thought it made more sense to kind of pull back a little bit, and reevaluate the growth. And hey, if it takes a little longer to grow to a certain point because the industry's crazy, like that's just fine. But it does mean some tough decisions. Um, difficult all around. No one was in an easy position in 2024. But I did leave the company, and it was a feeling of relief. I mean, I had worked a lot. It's bikes. Everyone says, "Oh, your job's so cool. You get to ride bikes. You're traveling all over." And it's like, no one. I'm not posting pictures of like being on phone calls at 2 in the morning,
Yeah.
and like it's a lot of hours of laptop time,
Yeah.
um, which I wouldn't trade for anything. But I did feel relieved. It was nice to leave. Then then just kind of really, getting through it, I was coming to terms with like, okay, what's my next venture going to be? It was fun to have some time off and to bike a lot, but then I was excited for what's next. And I started getting some call. This just a few months ago now. I got a few messages from people in the industry saying, "Hey, some stuff's going on with your old company," and I wasn't on good terms with the private equity firm at this point. Hadn't talked to them or really anybody from the company for a while, which was really unfortunate. It was kind of a bummer. I didn't tell anybody about it. I was like, no one wants to hear bad things. It's like whatever. We make bikes. Bikes are fun. I love riding my bikes. I have a garage full of Revels, and I'm never going to get rid of. Um, but I got some messages from people saying, "Hey, something's going on with your old company. You should look into it." And um, made some phone calls, made a bunch of phone calls, kind of gathered that the company was struggling and was trying to figure out what was going on. And I knew they were really struggling. I didn't know they were going to close. And I got a call from someone at the company, the CEO, the night before the news went public here a couple months ago, and he just said, "I'm really sorry, the business is closing
Whoa.
tomorrow." And it was just like, yeah, woof. Like, and I think in my mind I had expected maybe something like that to happen, but I didn't think it would happen so suddenly. And I mean, it was like a gut punch with a bunch more gut punches. I was just like devastated, and um, worked with one of my previous investors, a great friend, worked with a couple lawyers who had become great friends who rode our bikes. And I felt really lucky that a lot of people were kind of really helping me out because I didn't know how to manage a buying back a business in bankruptcy sort of situation. And it was just a wild few weeks. I was on the phone for hours and hours a day. So many people were reaching out with like words of support because they saw that Revel closed. And it really made me feel like a lot of people were out there gunning for us. But I was trying to buy the business back, but I didn't know if I could. And so I kind of just like was hiding out in my house, just like on the phone constantly. Like it was just such a wild few weeks. There was this required like 10-day public notice period and then a 1 hour auction to buy the assets of the company. And I had purchased the senior UCC position, but other people were trying to bid up to that. And like this whole thing was just like the amount of paperwork and phone calls that happened is the busiest few weeks of my life. And I was also just like, this needs to work. This needs to work because other people wanted to buy the company closed. The bank took the company. They foreclosed. It's like as if you don't pay a mortgage on your house, the bank takes the house. Like that's what was happening with this business. And other people were trying to buy the business, and the bank didn't care about me, which is totally fine, but they didn't care that I was the founder or anything. So I was able to kind of finagle a deal by saying like, I will pay you tomorrow. Here's my bid. I kept on like kind of whatever. It worked out, but it was a crazy time. And they closed the company and laid off most of the staff. It was terribly, it was horrible. It was, in my mind, the worst thing a company can do is to run it to a point where that happens without much of an answer of how to go forward. Um, a big part of me was embarrassed. This is the company I started, and this is the point they got it to. I left too early. I shouldn't have left. Would I have been able to help? I'd like to think so, but I don't want to say like I'd have all the answers. I don't know if I would have done things differently. I hope so, but just a lot of weird emotions. And it did work out. And this was, and then I gave the remaining staff here that they were just awesome about being up for the new challenge. I gave everybody a week off. I said, hey, it's not much, but I'm going to take a week off, reset. We're going to come back on June 2 and start this thing back up. We announced the new company, announced the new business model. I flew straight to Taiwan to meet with all the manufacturers. Our Taiwan team was just amazing, but I kind of said, hey, we got to, there's a lot of debt that needed to be paid to these manufacturers that had made Rebel products, and maybe legally through this sort of bankruptcy process that wasn't there. But if I wanted to keep working with these factories, like that's not the right way to do business. So I wanted to get with them right away, and I was so just like fired up after that trip to Taiwan. I took right away. It was these factories were so excited that Rebel was back. They're excited that the founder bought it back and not like a different finance group, because I guess people have seen like a lot that stuff maybe not go so well a lot of the time. And so I felt really fortunate, and then I guess since then it's just been like head down, like going gangbusters to build this company back up. And we had our first month of business and it went far better than I expected. Like there's been a lot of positivity and support out there from the community, from riders. We got a lot of work to do. I'm trying to hire a few people because we need more help now. But yeah, that's where
Was
we're
there
at now.
ever a moment where you considered just like maybe it's okay to let this go, or was it always like the second it went up, you're like, I have to have this? Because I don't know about you, but I feel like the bike industry right now is still in a pretty tight spot, and so in my mind, this is like the same effect of like running back into a burning building. Like,
Yeah.
well, like, was there ever a moment where you're like, I feel awful. This is terrible. This is embarrassing. This is frustrating. All of my people are getting dealt a really rough hand, but also like this is not like this wouldn't be the best time to buy a bike company, or maybe it would be. I don't know.
No, I think if I was looking at it purely from a business standpoint, there's a reason that everybody and every major bank is pulling out of the bike industry and has been for the last year. So I kind of jokingly said to a friend, like, yeah, I just bought an epically failing bike company. Like, I just made the worst financial decision of my life. But like, I really actually don't think I did. No, there was never any in my mind. I was like, I got to buy this back and make it work. And can I hire everybody back who they laid off? No, the company needed to be smaller, but can I at least keep that we have 14 staff here that have stayed, and that makes me feel really good. It's something, and can we build this thing back and do it better again this time? Yes. I've learned a lot. Our team has learned a lot. I think we have a little bit more experience, maybe a little bit more wisdom. I think taking the approach of like, I'm not going to build this thing and sell it, and like why would I do that? I was out of the bike industry for a year and a half, and I missed it a lot. It's fun to create bikes and to make bikes and to share that with people and deal with those challenges every day. So I think just having a renewed perspective on it gives me a lot of hope. The last month was one of the best months in the last, I haven't run all the numbers, but about the last year of business, which is really nice to see. Like it shows to me like people love the brand, and they know the bikes are amazing. And we've changed our sales model so prices can be a good bit lower, and it's already working, and it's working in kind of like every day things get better, but it's still like, man, we got a lot of work to do internally, and everybody here is really up for it and diving in. I mean, I hired Mike Giese, the guy that designed the first three bikes, hired him back right away. We had been talking for a little while before this anyway, and said we wanted to work together again, but we're able to get him back on board. So we're going kind of full on with product development to get the company set up for the future. So yeah, the bike industry is tough. Every time businesses they go in cycles. There's ups and downs. This is a big down for the bike industry right now, but I think that's a time to start something. Keep it lean, keep it tight, be smart, and we'll be here for the long haul. And if that means a few years of challenging business, we'll be just fine. That's all good.
What do you think would happen if another $1 million purchase order lands on your desk? That seems to be kind of a defining moment in sort of this process. And sure, it was like sort of special to that era in the industry, but how would you move forward differently than some of the steps that you took sort of pre PE?
At this point, I'd probably throw a little bit of a pizza party to start and celebrate celebrate that. I think everybody in the bike industry has gotten a lot smarter about not putting in fake orders, not getting in over everybody's head, and the whole greater consumer product industry has too since COVID. I mean, interest rates were in the twos. Now they're in the sevens or eights. Like that changes how you think about purchasing inventory drastically. That's the difference between a business making money and losing a lot of money. So in this environment with higher interest rates, I always thought I was getting the bike world because bikes are just fun. I didn't think like, what the Fed rate decision is or global tariffs, whatever the government's doing. Like, why would that affect my company? Oh, it affects us every day. I've kind of come to embrace that. And it affects everybody. It affects consumers. It affects what people pay for the products they want to buy. So I think we wouldn't see those $1 million purchase orders again, or if we did, we would know it wasn't real and it's not responsible, and that's not a good way to do business. And so being able to kind of be a lot more, I don't know, wise or understanding of how things work. It's the whole bike industry got caught up in these big purchase orders and big numbers, and a lot of it turned out to be not real, and it turned out to hurt the industry and therefore hurt consumers. Although maybe a great time to buy good bikes at a discount, but from a longer term, if bike businesses haven't been making a lot of money the last few years, they've invested less money in R&D. They've invested less money in making more bikes. They've invested less money in sponsoring athletes, in building trails, and whatever. Like good business is a good thing for everybody. I think a major thing in the bike world is getting good bikes at less high prices for customers. Like, I'm in the industry, I know what things cost, and bikes are priced where they should be. There's not a lot of bike companies that are just rolling in money, around here. So then we have to think of like, well, what needs to change to get bike prices lower? And as the sales model for one, how things are made, the logistics, how they're shipped. And I believe as a smaller company, we've done a very good job at setting up the baseline for that with our facility in Taichung, our facility here. We're switching our website around a little bit. We'll have a new site coming out. A lot of those logistical things can lead towards more efficiencies that get bikes at a better price for customers. And every time we do something efficiently and smart as a business, if that saves, $1 per bike or $50 per bike or whatever it is, and we can work on getting those prices down to where there's a sustainable profit margin for us to be here for the long term, but a more reasonable price for customers, to me, that's a big, long term goal that I want to keep working towards. And I think we're already on our way to getting
You
there.
are certainly on your way. It's been a pretty fascinating just route so far from 2019 to today, and I feel like this conversation is a really interesting kind of stop along the way to sort of check in and see where everything is, maybe a time capsule that we look back at in another year. And I think we have to have you back on the pod, a year from today to see like, okay, you're 5 weeks in now, what's it going to look like 12 months in? And this will be something we're going to follow along with. But thank you so much for just coming on and being transparent with us and sharing, the journey that you've been on, because, we read about this stuff on, Pink Bike or wherever else of PE firms coming in and doing this and what happens after that, and to actually get a little bit more of the insight of like what led to that moment and what, transpired from that moment. It's an exciting place to see you take control of it again and take those lessons that you've built up over the last 5 or 6 years and now reapply them.
Thanks. It's fun to tell the story. Thanks for giving me a chance here. I appreciate it.